Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Okay, welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show, round 2 for today. And man, am I excited. We have another great guest who is very skilled in his skill set, which is about culture, helping people do that. So it's Kyle, right? Kyle McDowell.
That's right.
Okay, I should have clarified that before, but I just want to make sure I'm saying that properly. Anyways, he's amassed an impressive track record, delivering great business results while leading tens of thousands of employees at some of America's largest companies. And his goal really is to make a lasting difference. And he's helping people lead differently. So create better leadership amongst their teams, their cultures. And really, I'm excited. I'm going to be asking questions about this. He doesn't know that yet, but leading themselves better, their own personal lives, and how that leads into the lives of the people that they're leading. So go ahead, Kyle, and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit more about who you are, where you came from, and why are you so passionate about what you're doing today?
Yeah, well, first, Sam, thanks for having me today. I'm thrilled to join you, and that introduction was wonderful. And I'll just expand on that if you like. Born and raised in Florida, and I grew up in I would say, middle class at best family, and work ethic was something that was always a point of emphasis from both of my parents. I was always taught from a very, very early age that if I wanted something, the only way to get that something, whether it was the new shiny pair of Air Jordans that had just come out, or whether it was, anything that would kind of scratch the itch for me at that moment, I had to work for it. And so I think work ethic is something that was a constant theme throughout my upbringing. And I have to say that's probably a big, big driving force in who I've become, both professionally, but certainly personally as well, because I think, anything worth having in this life is usually a result of overcoming one or more challenges. Like, you got to work for something. Anything worth having is rarely easy to get. But I grew up playing sports, and from a very early age, I recognized the value that the leader has and the impact a leader can have if they choose to take that role. And, when you're a 7-year-old football player and you're trying to rally a group of 7-year-olds around you, it's kind of like controlled chaos. And I always played the quarterback position growing up. And I realized that my success was largely driven by those around me, right? If the offensive line doesn't block well, the quarterback can't play well. If the running backs don't play well, the passing game is going to struggle. So I learned from an early age that a team is really the success of a team is only driven by the collective delivery of each of their efforts. So I carried that kind of paradigm through my career. I took my first job in corporate America at the ripe age of 18 years old. Man, I actually applied for a role at a local bank here in Tampa that I was 17 years old when I applied, and I rolled the dice that from the day that I applied to the time an offer were to come, if I were to be lucky enough to get that job offer, my birthday would have occurred. And that's what happened. I applied in June of 1993. I got the job in August of 1993. As a matter of fact, 2 days ago would have been my 30th anniversary inside of corporate America. But I learned early on in my career that, a little bit of effort goes a long way. And the first 20 years of my career, I methodically worked my way up the corporate ladder. I had bigger and bigger roles. And, man, to be candid, by most standards, I had a wildly successful career. I had the fancy title great compensation. I led thousands of people around the globe and always delivered great results. There was never a time in my career where I would look back and say, boy, we just underperformed here. It was always driven by great results. However, it was around year 22, maybe 23 of my journey that I realized I was missing things, man. I was doing it wrong. So although I achieved great results and again, by most standards, was very successful, I wasn't asking the right questions, man. And I found myself becoming apathetic towards the environments that I actually helped create, which was a really eye-opening experience for me because it allowed me to see the toxicity that was so pervasive in so many organizations, not only as one who was contributing to that toxicity, but also it opened my eyes to an opportunity to lead differently. It opened my eyes to a better way. And I realized, again, probably around year 23, that I wanted to be the leader that I never had. And in late 2019, I had an opportunity and just had this inkling to put a book together because the previous couple of years of my journey, I introduced some guiding principles that I call the 10 W's and drove a massive transformation of a multi-billion-dollar program with 15,000 employees on my team that changed my life and changed the course of my career forever. These principles changed my life so much so that I felt it was my obligation to put it in text and spread the word of these 10 W's and evangelize them as far and as wide as I possibly could. And ultimately that resulted in what's now a USA Today and Wall Street Journal bestseller. And I spend all of my waking hours evangelizing these messages, traveling the country, speaking. And ultimately that's what brings me here to chat with you today. So that's who I am in a maybe a 3 or 4 minute nutshell.
Awesome. Hey, I appreciate you sharing that with me. I got some notes here, but I'm curious with your operation that you're doing now, kind of spurred from the book. The titles begin with we.
That's right.
Yeah. So with this book, are you doing coaching, mentoring? Do you now go into companies as a consultant? Like, what's your primary bread and butter of that you transferred out of corporate America into what exactly, as far as like a practice?
Yeah. So when I realized, so I had a choice, man. I left corporate America in, as I mentioned, 2019, and I was at a crossroad. Do I go back into another big role, try to lead a big transformation, or do I evangelize these principles more broadly? And I chose the latter. So to do that, I launched Kyle McDowell, Inc., which is a firm that we largely focus on public speaking. We also do leadership counseling and coaching, and then organizational assessments, where we'll go into a company, meet the leaders of those organizations, meet different levels of the organization, and come back with basically a binder that says, here are your opportunities. Take them or leave them. They're opinions in many cases. A lot of it's quantified, but so that's kind of the 3 legs in my stool, and that's the speaking, the coaching, counseling, and then the organizational assessments. I have to tell you, the energy and excitement that I get from each one of those activities is wildly different. But where I've been spending most of my time the last several months is speaking. I'm doing 2 or 3 gigs a month. I was just in Vermont yesterday giving a talk to some wonderful folks at Audi. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was giving a talk in California to a school district that's looking to kind of up the vibe, the energy, the culture inside of their organization. So that's how I'm making a living today, man, in addition to the book sales. But, as corny as it may sound, Sam, I have transitioned from this W-2 corporate America guy. This is now my purpose. This is my obligation to spread these principles and these words, not for any type of personal gain, but mainly because of the satisfaction, the fulfillment, and the reignited passion that I watch when I deliver these talks and folks that have read my book. It's really, really a humbling and heartwarming experience that I've been fortunate enough to have.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. And I think that part of the goal of this podcast is for everybody to be fortunate enough to have that type of experience. Not everybody's going to end up doing the same thing. Not everybody loves public speaking. I love public speaking. I don't think there's anything more outside of like my family that I like get excited about, will lose sleep over in like a positive way, like Christmas Eve, Christmas morning type of lose sleep. Not because I'm like, I'm stressed out, but I'm so excited. Before I speak, I sleep maybe 3 hours a night before I sleep because I'm just so excited
Amped up. Yeah.
to go and deliver, and not because
Yeah.
I want to be the person who, just like yourself, it's not for self-aggrandizement, but it's like, if we can impact just one person, if one person gets it and changes their life as a result, then that's like one more person who sees happiness, one more person their life has changed. And then the impact of their life being changed and how that ripples out, like it's freaking rewarding. Like, it's just so amazing.
It's the coolest thing I do. Let me share a very brief story. So I mentioned I was with Audi a couple of days ago, and there was a fella in the audience, a very senior guy on the team. We got to the end of my presentation, and I said something very similar to what you just said. I said, some of you in this room, my principles and my approach may not resonate with. If one of you sees something different or wants to lead in a different way and have an impact greater than you ever thought you could, I'm good. If I change one person's path today, I'm good. And a fella raised his hand. He mentioned he had finished reading the book, and it had changed how he raises his family, how he interacts with his friends and family. Sam, maybe not a cool thing to admit, I teared up in front of 50 executives at Audi because it was so humbling. I have chills now telling you the story. That's why I do what I do. As cliche as that may sound, or as hokey as some people might think that comes across, dude, I floated home from Vermont after hearing his comments.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the people who have never experienced it, a lot of them are still living quiet lives of desperation. And they think that that's only for special people. Only special people get to have those experiences. And I think a big part of why I haven't read your book yet, but I'm excited to keep asking questions. But I think we vibe on a similar topic or mindset. A big part of leading the right way is so that more people can have those experiences.
Well said.
And that's really why we do what we do, is so that more people can have them. So if you're sitting there thinking, now that's for special people, I get it. I was there. I used to think that until it was for me. And when it was for me, just like you can't shut me up about it. I have people who don't like me because I won't shut up about what I'm passionate about. And it's like, look, if I go down in history as a person who helped a lot of people, and there was a lot of people who didn't like me because I talked about my passion too much, that's okay. Like, I'm okay with that, because if I can help one person, I mean, especially if you can help them parent better, I mean, that's like, if they lead their lives better. And it's not about, oh, I want to parent better. I'm guessing, I don't know this guy, and I'm sure you may get to know him better over time, but I'm sure he didn't want to become a better leader so that he would get better results in his family. I'm sure he wanted to become a better leader because he wanted to be a better person. And that changed how he was going to show up. And yes, that changed how he was going to interact with his family. But because he has more respect for himself, he in turn has more respect for his family.
You nailed it, Sam. And that has been unintended byproduct of this journey that I'm on. I set out this goal to write this book so I could kind of rid corporate America of its toxic ways. There's so much dysfunction in the jobs that I had. The bigger the company, the deeper the toxicity runs, in my experience. The unintended byproduct was not only on me, which has been profound, it's changed who I am as a person outside of the workplace. And when I hear comments like the one I just shared with you, that's not the first time I've heard that. So while I approach this from a leadership perspective, and I want organizations and teams to be more we oriented, you can't help but lead that way and have it impact yourself on a personal note as well. And if you're able to separate the two, I think you're a hypocrite. And that's what's
I was going to say, I don't think the energy wouldn't work right. If you think that you can lead somebody, but not be the person actually and embody those principles, I think that everybody will smell it from a mile away, and it'll even more detrimentally impact. At least before, you were open about the jerk you were. Now you're trying to veil it by pretending to be something else. I was literally talking to my wife, Charlie, about this 2 or 3 days ago, because I heard a speaker at the last conference I spoke at. Her name's Jamie Hess. If you ever, anyways, look her up. It was really cool. She trademarked the word gratitudeology, and so her whole thing was like, gratitude changed her life. Like, learning to be grateful changed her life. And she was an addict of a lot of substances, and she would go to these addict meetings, and they said, "Look, you got to start being grateful." And so she was, for years, she said she was the person that was like a chronic relapser, and everybody thought there was no way she was ever going to make it because she was doing all the work. She was writing her gratitude list. She was writing everything out, but she was doing it out of spite to say that she did it and it didn't work.
Back in the box.
And it's like that person, that mentality, you have to surrender yourself to the possibility that it actually might work. And I don't think that for me, my life didn't change until I was like, you know what? I'm going to surrender myself to the idea that I actually can change. Rather than saying, I'm going to do all this stuff and prove that I can't change, I'm going to do it with the idea, well, I can change, right? Even if I don't believe it yet, I'm just going to start telling myself because apparently that's what everybody else does. And then sooner or later, you're a whole new person. You're like, wait a second, that worked. I'm a new person. And it's exciting.
There's a lot of power in that. There's a lot of power in that, Sam. And I think that you didn't say it directly, but I hope your listeners picked up on a really important component of what you just said is making that decision. You had to consciously make a decision, be purposeful about how you were going to live your life from a particular moment going forward. And we have to make that decision consistently, right? You can't do it on a Tuesday and wake up Wednesday and be a different. You got to make that decision every single day, even when it's difficult. But that's the point though, right, man, is people have to make that decision and be purposeful. You're really purposeful. And that's why I told the team at Audi a couple of days ago, it's like, you can continue to lead the way you're leading now. You can continue to get the same results that you've been getting, or you can make a conscious decision to be the leader you never had, drive change in a different way. And oh, by the way, you will find so much more fulfillment and satisfaction because you'll raise the game of those around you. And as far as I'm concerned, that is the ultimate guide to success. It's the ultimate leader's barometer is how have I impacted those around me? Are they better off for having known me? And it's what I have coined as my leadership legacy. I want people to look at what I've done not from results and KPIs and P&L perspective, but how many leaders have I helped create? How many people have I helped on their journey to become better than they were the day before yesterday? Not just in terms of their leadership capacity or skill set, as a human on this planet, whatever role I've helped play and you being a better one of those is where I get my satisfaction now. But you have to choose to make that a path for yourself. Absolutely.
I love that. And I want to tie that into something that you had mentioned earlier about, hurting a group of 7-year-olds and who's going to be the leader. And then you said something that I think is really important and most people miss this, but that leadership is a choice. Right. And I actually speak at leadership conferences 2 or 3 times a year. Maybe I can get you to come speak at one of them. They're fun to do. I love them. But one of the things that we focus on is that everybody is a leader and everybody is a follower. Like there's not really anybody who's just one or the other. And the reason is because if you look to your right, left, up, down, behind you, forwards, there's other people who you're around, which means your influence is by definition both leading and following other people. It's just like, it's how the natural thing is. So I want you to talk more about, I don't know all your principles, so maybe this is one of them, maybe it's not, but the idea that everybody is a leader, everybody in the organization is a leader. And once they adopt that identity, how that changes their individual behavior, because they're no longer looking for the positional leader who maybe is their boss or their manager or whatever. But if everybody adopts the identity that they are a leader and their role is leadership, even though they don't have the title, how does that impact the organization? So I'm curious let's just riff on that. Let's talk about it.
Hey, one hell of a segue. And I think it was unintentional, but it was a really good one. So for context for your audience, the principles that we've mentioned a couple of times are called the 10 W's. There are 10 statements that I've coined to be our guiding principles and our path to a culture of excellence. And I came about these one evening right before I was about to meet with the top 40 or 50 leaders of my newly inherited $7 billion program with 15,000 employees. I led the nation's largest healthcare enrollment and customer service function for a few years. And the night before, I knew I had to make an impact. I just joined the organization, but I knew if I walked in and gave the same stale kind of, lots of rhetoric around, my experiences, the things that I had done, and less about what that team was capable of and capitalizing on the legacy that team had already established, a lot of tenure in the room, I would fail. So the night before, I crafted these sentences with no pre-planning, man. I landed with 10 sentences that each start with the word we, and I'm not super creative, so I have the 10 we's, and they are the foundation for the book that I mentioned. But your transition or your segue to this is uncanny, because the second principle of the 10 we's is we lead by example. And the point here is not to say my title is what I lead with, or, I don't have a title, so I can't be a leader. What I tell folks is you're leading by example right now. But the question you have to ask is it an example worth following? Am I creating a magnetism that pulls people along with me in a positive way? Because, you can do a wonderful job leading by example, and that example could be garbage, and people, they don't trust you. So they perpetuate that same level of duplicitous behavior, or they're just toxic in general. So I tell the team, you are leading. So set that example, be someone that you would be proud to watch in your own documentary. So for example, if I had a documentary film crew following me every day inside of corporate America, is it an example that I would be worth following? Is it an example that my mother would be proud of? What if it was in the company newsletter or blasted all over the internet? So the documentary film crew is a kind of a metaphor to say someone's always watching you, and are your actions worth replicating? And is it the example that you'd be proud to set?
Yeah, I think that's huge. And so with that, I want to ask a follow-up question. And I don't know the best way to ask this, so we're just going to shoot. But I think that there's a time and a place as a leader in an organization, or a follower in an organization. Maybe you don't have the right title. When is the right time to, again, we'll try, to lead counter to what is being suggested versus when to lead by following? And so what I mean by that is, let's say somebody, the leader or the person who has the most influence in the room, potentially, is doing something that you actually don't feel is right, or you feel like, hey, we need to actually not do that, right? But maybe they're a positional leader, maybe there's somebody who has more authority or whatever, and more people want to follow them. At what point is it better? Like, how do you make the determination of, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to be a follower in that case, I'm going to lead the group of people somewhere else, versus how do you determine when to say, you know what, I'm going to lead by my example, and because I'm going to throw my full weight in support and sustain this idea, principle, new mission, or whatever that a company's throwing out, then other people are going to follow me because of my support. So it's kind of an interesting question. I'm not even sure how to answer it. I'm just curious how to make that determination.
Yeah. So two paths come to mind from the question that you just asked. The first is, I think a lot of people overcomplicate what it means to lead by example, and they think it has to be some profound set of actions that tells everyone that I am all knowing and that I am worth following, that I set the standard at whatever XYZ is. And that's not true. You can lead by example. My favorite example, before COVID and we had, so much work from home, but even now in some of the offices I visit, is I can walk through the office with my head down staring at my phone. And I've just led by example. And the message that I've sent is, whatever coworker or colleague that's walking towards me, they are not as important as whatever I have going on my phone. And that's garbage leadership. Doesn't have anything to do with my title. It just says that I don't think you're important enough to even make eye contact and say hello or good morning to you. So I think we over-index on what it means to lead by example, first of all. Second of all, the second path that comes to mind when you ask the question is something that's got to be handled very delicately. And I'm not naive to this. So if you and I are on the same team and we're in a group setting with a bunch of our peers, and the senior person in the room is kind of pontificating on a path that we're taking, and you or I disagree with that, I'm not naive to the fact that we both have bills to pay. We've got obligations we got to meet, and we understand that in a lot of environments, it is not encouraged to raise your hand and be the voice of dissent. So we have to be mindful of that, right? We can't be a cowboy because there are repercussions. Where I take this, though, is what's most important about the way I evangelize these principles and the profound leadership change that I had was you must create the environment where people are not only it's okay for them to express their dissent, but it's encouraged and they are obligated to do so. So, I have another principle that is we own our mistakes. We don't judge people by mistakes in my circle. We judge them by how quickly they remedy the mistake and if it's repeated. We have another principle that is we pick each other up when someone else makes a mistake or they're in a bad way. They've got something going on outside of work that's slowing their progress or their success inside the workplace. We got to pick those people up. But if that environment does not exist, right, and you and I are in this scenario together, and the boss is saying something we just can't get behind, ultimately we have to make a choice if we want to follow that and get in line like a good corporate citizen or a good soldier, for lack of a better metaphor, would do, or do we want to not? And we understand that when we don't follow, there could be repercussions that adversely affect our ability to stay employed at the company. So it's a delicate balance, man. But that's why I think in any position, any title, any company, the goal is to create an environment free of fear, void of apathy, and people can actually be their true, authentic selves. And we can agree to disagree diplomatically. We can call each other out on each other's development opportunities, of course, very diplomatically. But that environment must be there before we just start leading by example in a way that is contrary to our leadership, because the repercussions could be so drastic that we're asked not to come back the next day. And that's not a good scenario, obviously.
Right. And that's not the desired outcome. That desired outcome, I think, is not by everybody. And this is what's so fascinating. It's like some people, they just are lazy and they don't want to do what they're being asked to do. And those people, raise your hand so we can get you out of here. You're a low performer, but I think that there are some times where people just view things differently. And so then sometimes company policies or whatever go into force. And it's like, you get to choose. Do I just stay on the sidelines and not publicly disagree, but maybe my lack of public disagreement is taken as agreement. But then when you actually examine my personal behavior, I'm not doing what I don't feel right to do, but I never vocalized that. And so then that's an issue. I think that going through this conversation, I think that if there's not a culture already established where you're allowed to disagree, I probably would go have a private conversation with the leader. I think that's probably the best. I don't know. That's probably what I would do.
I completely agree with you, Sam. It's unfortunate, though. Many leaders are not even open to the conversation, and there is retribution and there will be repercussions if you voice any type of dissension. And that's a real shame. But you said something that reminded me at the beginning of you just said something that reminded me of a comment you made at the beginning of the conversation, or something we touched on. And that is making the conscious choice to be a leader that you never had, or to be the person that drives change regardless. So many of us, me included, the first 20 plus years of my career, I was focused on results and the dollar. I was not focused on the impact I could have on people, which when we do that, when we reprioritize and focus on our impact of others, the dollars come, the results come, because you have a team now that is aligned with you instead of in competition with you. So I think so many of us just kind of shuffle our feet through corporate America, because corporate America has taught us in many cases, our opinions are not valid. Just get in line, keep your head down. And there are companies that are ripe with seasoned executives that have made a great career with lots of money, just putting their head down instead of doing what they think is the right thing. They're just yes men and women. And I think that's a soul-sucking way to go through your career, because if we're asked to lose our authenticity, we lose the diverse perspectives, the experiences, and we lose options and opinions that may take us down a different and better path. Think about it this way, man. This is an example I use a lot. An NFL team, a football team in the NFL, has 53 men on the active roster and one head coach. It makes no sense mathematically for that one coach to be the only person that is allowed to challenge all 53 men. It doesn't make any sense. That's why they have assistant coaches. And that's why players within the team are obligated to challenge one another when they don't perform. The point here, though, is if everyone has a voice and everyone is obligated and allowed and empowered to call out when someone else is underperforming, or maybe someone makes a statement that we disagree with because of, we have good data or experience to say why that statement is not valid or why the path is not the right path, you get more opinions, more diverse perspectives, and you're much better positioned for success instead of one person driving all the thoughts. To me, that's a recipe for mediocrity.
Yeah,
and apathy, by the way.
Yeah, and I think lack of communication or open communication or free communication is a big issue. Something else you mentioned, though, that I want to just, again, these are things that I think are important that I've seen in my own life when I've interacted with the world, is sometimes the word, like the term or phrase, be my authentic self, gets overused. And you said, hey, we got to do this, but then from a leadership perspective, we have to correct people, be diplomatic about it. I think I just want to highlight that, right? Being your authentic self doesn't mean having disregard for other people. Like, I want to be in a system where I can just be myself without any consideration of others. That's not what we're talking about. So
that's right. That's right. One of the principles is we challenge each other. It's my favorite. It's the most difficult for a lot of people to embrace, but it's also the most impactful when embraced. But the principle comes with a caveat. We challenge each other, but those challenges must be grounded in data or experience. Otherwise, you're just complaining. An example. So you and I again on a team together, senior leader comes in and says, we're going to start a podcast about your legacy on this planet. We're going to start a podcast about that. And here's the path we're going to take. You, my friend, having done this as long as you have, in my organizations, the teams that I like to build, you are obligated to raise your hand and challenge that guy because you have the experience that says you're taking us down the wrong path. You're setting us up for failure. I have experience in this. So you are obligated to now challenge. What you're not allowed to do is say, oh, we're going to use Sony microphones instead of Shure. Well, I like Shure better. Like, there's no data there. That's your opinion. And you're just
it's like, who cares? You could use your iPhone and it doesn't matter. That's not going to change the listening of your podcast at all.
Right on. So, everybody has an opinion and everyone is allowed to voice their opinion. You're only obligated to listen to that opinion, in my estimation, if that challenge or opinion, challenge/opinion comes with data or experience. Otherwise, it's just a complaint, and we're no better off with complaints. We need to quantify these things as much as possible.
Yeah, and sometimes, just to take that a step further, it may not be a complaint per se, like it may not come across as a complaining thing, but a big problem in every organization and every team and life, and even in an individual sense, is a lack of focus. And so when somebody has an objective, rather than thinking about all the different ways to accomplish it and trying to be helpful by creating more possible ways to accomplish something, like there's like a very short time called the brainstorming phase where maybe that's allowed. But once there's been some decisions made, just decide and move forward with it. The constantly bringing up of like, well, we could do this. It's not complaining. Like it comes across as like, I'm trying to help, but it's not helpful. Just put your head down. And like, this is like the opposite maybe, but like sometimes you do I've been training my team on this a lot recently. The shortcut to success is to just do the work the first time. That's the shortcut. Searching for a shortcut, searching for a better way, searching for all that ultimately is going to leave you more confused and it's not going to work. And there's a book, I don't know if you've ever read this book, phenomenal, Outwitting the Devil.
No.
Oh, dude, you got to read it. You got to listen to it. Don't read it. I mean, you can read it, I guess, but the audio book on Audible is phenomenal because it's like voice actors. It's a lot like the Screw Tape Letters, if you've ever heard of that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So Napoleon Hill, after he wrote Think and Grow Rich, he basically went through this time period. And it's his kind of conversation with the devil. And so he's like grilling the devil and asking questions. But one of the things he asked him is, what is more detrimental to your purposes, Satan? Are you more scared of somebody with a phenomenal plan, the best plan in the world, but is inconsistently applying that plan? Or somebody who has a terrible plan, like never going to work out probably, but is absolutely consistent and determined to make it work? Like, which one is worse for you, devil? And he says, the person who has a crappy plan, but is absolutely determined, he is not in my control. The person who has a phenomenal plan, but is inconsistently acting or constantly searching for a better way, the devil can control him all day long and help him procrastinate because he's not an actor. He's not somebody who's doing anything. And so it kind of goes back to like, it may not be complaining per se as what you think your child complains or whatever, but just the sheer act of like creating more ways to do something than is necessary, it's not helpful. And it's detracting from a clear vision, mission of leadership. So complaining doesn't always look like whining, in my opinion. It looks like obfuscating the objective. Like, don't do that.
Well, and there's a time and a place, right? So as you mentioned, use the word brainstorming. If we're in a group setting and we're trying to plot our course, then that's the time to what if. Let's talk. Let's get all the scenarios on the table. But when we shut the door and say, this is the path we're taking, that is not the time to throw out. I say this to my teams, or used to say it a lot to my teams, is there are no second guesses and there will never be an I told you so conversation. Because if we're having an I told you so conversation, that means you didn't mention something strong enough before, and you've led us down, you have allowed us to travel down this path of failure, for lack of a better term. So I'm with you 100%, man.
Yeah. So anyways, just something to think about. So if you're on Facebook, we're going to sign off Facebook. We got a few more questions for Kyle here, but you can listen to those on the actual episode when it gets released on Apple, iTunes, Google, Android, whatever you listen on, Spotify, and on YouTube as well. So anyways, we'll talk to you guys later. I've got a few more questions for Kyle. Okay. So we're getting back into this because another thing you mentioned that I want to, let's see. When do you got to go? You good for 10?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good.
Cool. So I want to cover two more things then. So one of the things that you kind of mentioned in passing, maybe not exactly, but the component of it is success is a team effort. But my question is, how do you encourage and praise and recognize each person in your team? Like from a leadership perspective, how are you either creating that culture or actually driving that culture of encouraging, praising, recognizing every person on the team individually?
The last word that you just said, Sam, was the most important word of that question, individually. And I say that and I capitalize on that because everybody likes to be rewarded and acknowledged, but everybody likes it differently. I think in every, in every environment, in every team environment, there are the ABCs of recognition. I think every single employee wants to be acknowledged for their contribution. That's the A. They want to be rewarded for their contribution. And they want to connect the value that they've delivered as part of that team to the end user of that product or service that they helped deliver. So if we first acknowledge that everybody wants this, and I think that's safe to say, everybody comes to work for the most part, and they come to the team environment for the most part, with some exceptions, because there are saboteurs in the world. But for the most part, they are coming to be their best selves. And when they deliver on something that has been an agreed upon outcome or a path that we've decided and they've executed on that path, you need to reward them in a way that's consistent with what they value. Some people, they like it. They like an attaboy or an attagirl, appreciate you, but they want it off stage. They don't want it in front of other people. They don't want to be in the company newsletter. They just don't like that source of attention. Other people, they thrive on the public endorsement. So how do you do this is the question you must ask. And the only way to do this effectively is to get to know your team, know your team members, know your teammates. What drives them? What makes them happy? Maybe one person on the team, the best way to show your gratitude for them is on a Friday afternoon, they want to go hang out and spend time with their grandkids. Well, acknowledge that, but you'll never know that if you don't get close enough to ask that question and them feel close enough to share that with you. So get close to your team members, understand what makes them tick, understand what they value, and understand how they like to be valued, and then do it individually for each one of them as those times present themselves.
Awesome. I love it. And so then this last question here is, again, these are I don't know where they're going with these, but I just want to know that
my favorite kind.
What your thoughts are on it. So as far as leadership, right? We've talked about being a leader versus follower and how that play and dynamic might happen inside of a team, whether you're the leader or you're part of the team, maybe you're just brand new. When you joined that last role in that company, you went out and you made a conscious choice, right? I don't want to be like every other person who's been in this position. I want to do something different. Now, are you fully aware that the people who just hired you want something different? Maybe they want you to be something like what they're used to. Maybe they want just a babysitter rather than an innovator in that role. But that's a choice where you maybe had a little bit of knowledge. We're how am I going to be set apart and different in that role? So here's what I want to know. How much of leadership do you think is imitation versus admiration or adoration?
Well, I don't know that I'd categorize it in any of those terms, candidly, because imitation implies that you're being anything other than authentic. And I think if you want to establish trust in and among your team, authenticity is huge. And I think it is exponentially greater when it's married with relatability, because I think authenticity plus relatability equals trust. So if I'm imitating someone else or being something that I'm not, that gets, as you mentioned earlier in this conversation.
So I'm going to push back a little bit because I want to go deeper on this. Okay. So when I'm talking about imitation, I'm not necessarily talking about imitating. I'm not talking about conscious imitation. And the reason this comes up, right, in a family setting, I tend to, before I got conscious of it, my discipline style, my leadership style inside my house was how I saw my mom and dad leading our family. So then when I started a family, or when I became a leader in it, even amongst my brothers and sisters, I just naturally, thus being authentic to who I thought I was being, was leading in a way that I had previously seen or was programmed, for lack of a better word, to lead. So you can still be authentic, but still be leading in an imitative way. And so how do you separate that and say, look, rather than leading off of just what I was programmed with, being more intentional about your leadership? Does that further clarify the question?
It does. And I think where you and I got sideways is just on the term imitation, right? Because when I hear imitation, I think anything less than authentic. So in the way you framed it, using the word programmed, I think is much more appropriate.
Okay.
So it depends though, right? So let's continue with your same example, right? So if you are exhibiting and leading in a way that you were programmed to do, but let's pretend the results are not good. So whether it's parenting or whatever the scenario is, right? The first thing we have to recognize is what I'm doing is not working. So the imitation in this scenario clearly is not working. I got to do something different. So the point here, back to relatability, right, is we've got to lead. Like I would lead a team in one of my businesses today very differently than I would lead a team in a different business that I'm associated with today, because they're different profiles of people. And to be relatable to them, I have to talk and work with them on a level that they can connect. We can connect with one another. So I'm not going to imitate anyone. I've got to lead in a way that relates to their paradigm, that resonates with them. So I think as long as you're being true to yourself, regardless of how you've come about those principles, your approaches, whatever your paradigm is, however you landed on that, whether you went to some fancy business school or whether you grew up in the school of hard knocks or whether you observed it in your parents, whatever it is that got you to the place that you're at and how you're behaving and leading, you must continually assess. Is it working? Is it impactful? Am I helping those around me? Because regardless of how you got there, if the answer is no to those questions, you need to reevaluate it and do some serious self-reflection that maybe a different path is the better path.
Yeah, I think that is the key, is you have to be willing to look at the past, the assessment, and say, hey, where am I at? Is this where I want to be? And then is it working? Because if it's not working, then you got to change course. And a lot of people, so they have, one of my speeches that I give is that hindsight isn't really 2020, right? We always have this hindsight's 2020. It's like, no, hindsight isn't really 2020. And the reason it's not 2020 is because most people are so freaking happy to get rid of their crappy past that they forget to inspect it. They forget to actually learn from it. They never actually turn around and look at their past. So hindsight isn't 2020 in life. We think it is, but it's not, because people aren't actually learning. If hindsight was 2020, we would go back and say, okay, how did we get that crappy result? Rather than just oh yeah, that happened. I wish that wouldn't have happened. Rather than looking at the result and saying, I wish that wouldn't have happened, we got to inspect, how did that happen? Why did it happen? And how are we not going to have that happen again? That's the only way it becomes 2020. Otherwise, it's just a crappy, blurry vision of the past. And we just continue to make the same crappy mistakes moving forward. And so it's kind of an interesting thing, but I think that's huge. The assessment of, is this working or not? And you have to be open to the fact that you have to be willing to change, and that you can change, and that not every situation deserves the same type of leadership. And that's
yeah, buddy. I've coined something that I use that's called the mirror of truth. And the mirror of truth is something it's a metaphor for just self-reflection, right? For me, it's quiet time, either at the end of the day or the first part of the morning where the world is quiet, no one's bothering me, my phone's not in my hand. I can evaluate, how did I behave yesterday? Was I someone that would create followership? Was I someone that my mother would be proud of? Did I behave in a way that is worth authenticating? The challenge, though, is most folks don't take the time, including me. I go through periods of time where I'm not as disciplined. finding your mirror of truth. They don't take the time, and that can be a loved one, it can be a confidant, it could be a colleague, doesn't matter. But taking the time to either do it by yourself in a way that is open and honest, and you're not afraid of that reflection, or grabbing someone that you can trust that they'll tell you like it really is, right? They're not going to sugarcoat it. They're going to tell you that if you were out of line and you're behaving in a way that's not consistent with who you want to be. But the key is, like everything we've said today, man, you have to make the conscious choice to have that conversation, look in the mirror, whatever your avenue or your outlet is.
Yeah, I love it. Well, how would somebody, if they wanted you to come speak to their organization, reach out to you? Maybe they just want your book. I'm sure it's everywhere, but maybe you don't sell it through Amazon, so you get paid more, which is fine. I think that's a smart thing to do. Amazon's a great place, but if you sell it on your own website, you get paid more. If you ever write a book, be aware of that. Okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. Well, it's not wrong.
Well, no, it's not. It's not wrong at all. But the truth is, I didn't write the book to get rich, because you just don't get rich unless you sell millions of copies of books, and I'm not there. But you can find the book essentially wherever books are sold, including Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, anywhere books are sold. I happen to like the audiobook personally. I narrated it. I think it has a little bit more energy than the pages as you flip through them. But so pick the book up. I would encourage anyone to grab that. You can find me at my website is KyleMcDowellInc.com, and I am on nearly every social channel at Kyle McDowell Inc. And the value for me anyway, man, of being on these social channels is interacting with people that either have questions about the book or have read the book, and they either don't get it or they think I'm kind of all unicorns and rainbows, and they bounce scenarios off me. And that's where those interactions have been invaluable to me in helping continue to spread the message. So I'd love to hear from your audience if there's anything I can do to help aside from the book, leadership journey questions, personal journey questions. I love those interactions. I welcome them.
Sure. Well, awesome. Hey, go and check out his website, and we'll catch you guys next time on the Fuel Your Legacy Show. Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me. And if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.